Hi, everyone. We're going to get started as soon as enough people are able to kind of join in. So if you're already here and you can hear me, my name is Dawn Yargeau. I would like you to put in the chat where you're from so we can get an idea of where everybody's from. All right. So it looks like the numbers are slowing down a little bit. Thank you for all those messages. Anyone else that's joining in, if you would like to throw in where you're at currently in the world, we would love to know where you're from. We're going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to start with a couple of housekeeping notes. First of all, there will be some opportunity for question and answers at the end. What we would like you to do is to make sure that you put everything in the chat. We will try to get them as we go along. We have a couple of team members who are on here who may be answering it in the meantime. Your microphones and cameras are automatically disabled for attendees. I'm going to introduce you to a few people here. But first, Kristen Copenhaver is going to give us a brief about Wayne State, just to kind of give you an overview.
Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us for this webinar. We thought we'd throw in a couple of slides just about Wayne State University School of Medicine so that you know who we are. For those of you I saw in the chat, there are many from here right in Michigan, but there are many people joining us on the call from all around the US. So we've been around for nearly 160 years now. And we have consistently prepared students to be healthcare leaders and advocates who go on to change the world. So we have a mission focused on serving the underserved and underinsured populations. It's very important to us here. And our community, we're very involved in our community. Our students are supported, connected, and successful. So just some stats here. There are a lot of stats on this page, and I won't go into all of them or many of them. But again, we're very involved in the community. We're very involved in making sure that we impact quality of life and help underserved populations. So a lot of our experiences for students are geared at getting them out in the community so that they can learn and grow and gain perspective and understanding of different kinds of populations, different clinical sites, and so on. We have 70 plus clinical sites. We have 13 student-run free clinics, 100 plus student organizations. So our students have opportunities to get involved with all kinds of different things. And research, we have a lot of research opportunities for our students as well. We're a highly ranked research institution. And so pretty much if you have a passion to do research, we have faculty, we have mentors that can help you in whatever you're really interested in here at Wayne State University. And our community is very strong. We have 26,000 living alums all across Michigan, the US, and the globe. So very well connected, and we have a very high success rate on our residency match stats. So 98% again this year, 98.16, I believe, was the number, 14. And so our students are matching at high rates into a lot of different kinds of specialties, 24 specialties in 30 states. So that's a little bit about us, and we'll get back to the agenda of the day today. So thank you very much and welcome again. Thank you, Dawn, for the opportunity.
So today's presenters, we have Emma Harris, Emma is an M2 student interviewer who spends her time interviewing students for us, even though she is a medical student working very hard. I have Laura Hetzler. She's an academic advisor in the pre-med office at Wayne State University. We have Amanda Horowitz, who is an academic advisor in the pre-med office at Wayne State University. And Doug Peacock, he's an academic services officer in the pre-med office. He's our newest pre-med officer at Wayne State University. And then we have Dr. Stacy Varner. Dr. Varner is a faculty interviewer for the admissions committee, and they're going to kind of give you some perspective on what they're looking for when we're talking about specific experiences that they're able to see in the application. So we're going to start with application timing tips, and I will ask one of the advisors. Laura is going to
jump on this. Yeah. Hi, guys. Thanks so much for joining today. It's always a pleasure to talk to future professionals. I know this is a super stressful time of year for you as we think about kind of the big piece that sits in front of you right now, the application. My goal when working with students that I would share with all of you is that we really encourage students to apply as early as possible, as long as they're submitting a high quality piece of work that they feel represents them in all of their strengths that they've really spent time crafting. Okay. Submitting early, if you haven't taken the time to make sure that it's a competitive application, doesn't help you. All right. Ideally, I want all of my candidates to know both that they have a strong GPA and a strong MCAT score before applying. That means you've gotten that score report in hand. You know that the number there is going to enable you to apply to and be a realistic candidate at your target schools, and it's not a surprise. The reason I like people to have this information is because of how long and stressful the process is. And it breaks my heart a little bit every year when students go through the process and have spent a lot of money on schools before they know that score. And then maybe they're not happy kind of with the final result. And it's just they're out of pocket a lot of money. So ideally, you've got both those strong grades that are representative of all the hard work you've put in for the last 3, 4, 5 years, as well as that test score on the MCAT that shows that you can really synthesize information across multiple domains and apply your higher thinking skills as you get ready to move into med school. Remember that your MCAT scores and your GPA are going to impact where you apply. I think MSAR, the Medical School Admissions Requirement Guide created by the AAMC, is a phenomenal tool for helping you make your big list of schools because it allows you to do a slice and dice of data. You can see the difference between if it's a public institution, the difference between admission information for in-state versus out-of-state. You can see the difference between admitted students and matriculated students. And you can identify, they've got a great little feature that allows you to put your test score and GPA in there, and it can help you kind of see and visualize where your score falls in the schools you're interested in. Now, when it comes to considering where you're applying, it is important to remember there's a lot that goes into it beyond just the score. And really considering that fit is critical. The director of admissions, Kristen, mentioned kind of what the personality of a Wayne State School of Medicine student looks like and the way that our School of Medicine take students who are really engaged in their communities. So when I'm talking to students, if they tell me they've got a school they're interested in, we're going to talk a lot about that fit for program and how the things that they've engaged in over time will help schools identify if they're a good candidate for their individual program, because they're looking, once they've decided you're smart enough, they're really looking at the ways you've spent your time to assess if they want to interview you. I think the biggest thing that we see is trying to help students develop an understanding about how the MCAT score specifically might impact where they want to focus their time and attention. So this is why, another reason I want you to have your MCAT score before you hit submit. Nationally, we know that the competitive GPA for an admitted student to an MD program is around a 3.7. DOs do tweak a little lower on the GPA, but it's still, 3.5, 3.6. So it's still a very, very solid GPA. Where we see the big distinction is in their MCAT scores of an average admitted student for an MD program versus a DO. We see a point distribution up as high as like 10 points in some cases. So knowing that score will really help you focus your efforts on the type of schools you plan to apply to as you go through the application process. Now, one of the things I mentioned was the importance of applying early. And that's because of rolling admissions. I'm going to take a minute to kind of explain the typical way that rolling admissions works in many schools across the country. So some schools will still do what we would call a single review. There are very few schools that use a single review process right now, meaning that they collect all their applications, they review all their applications, and then they decide who they want to interview. Majority of schools in the country use a more rolling process. So they begin to get information from the application portals late in June, usually right before the 4th of July weekend. As those come in, there may be some screening at a very minimal level for MCAT and GPA. So I'm thinking of, there's a school in the state of Michigan that I think their minimum is a 3.0 and a 497, right? So very low numbers. And as long as you meet those basement numbers, you're going to move through the process and get a secondary application, right? So students start frantically working on those secondary essays, writing more about the way their work and activities fit the mission of the school, and really reflect on some of the qualities that are important to that particular program. You send those all off to the schools. And obviously, some people are going to start moving through this process faster than others because there's a delay at each point. If you submit early, you're going to get those secondaries early. And then if you're on top of it, you're going to get those secondaries turned around in 5 to 10 days. And then schools have that information and can begin deciding whether they want to interview you. As programs send out interview invitations, we usually see majority of schools are starting to interview in, let's say, August. As they're offering seats for interview, they're continuing to review new incoming applications. And then starting October 15th, MD schools can begin offering seats for traditional regular applicants. But even as they start offering people seats, they are continuing to review more applications that come into them. They're continuing to go through the thousands of applications they get and decide other people they want to interview. So here's what ends up happening. The later you are in the process, the more interviews have already happened and the fewer interview seats that are available to be given out, right? Because schools are usually kind of looking at, is there somebody else in the pipeline that we want to hold, keep our eye out for, make sure we have space to interview them. So it just becomes a numbers game at that point. And so I want all of my students that I work with to have the best chance to get an interview. And that means getting their information out there earlier. But again, like I said, with a really well-crafted application. The last piece I'm going to touch on in this slide circles back to this idea of the MCAT score and how that will impact your school list. Now, I was working yesterday with a couple undergrads, one who had gotten her score report over the weekend. And she was not happy with her score. She's really hoping MD. It was more of a DO, kind of a DO average score. And so we were talking about a retake and how to handle that. And I think that it's important to know a couple of things about if you're planning to do a retake. First of all, you need to make sure if you're doing a retake that you indicate on your application that you have a future test date planned. If you don't communicate that with the schools, they have no way of knowing and may make a decision on you based on all of the information that they have currently in front of them, Okay, so they could decline you earlier than they would have if you'd shared a future score date. I think you also need to be really thoughtful about identifying what you need to do differently in order to prepare, so that you can get the significant difference in that second attempt that you need to open up the admissions door for yourself. And know that many schools will kind of put you on hold until they get that second score. So again, you've been processed, they have your information, you've probably written your secondary essays, but no action is going to happen until that second test has happened and the score report has gone through and can be accessed by the admissions committee.
Thanks, Laura.
This is me. Hi, everyone. My name is Doug Peacock. I'm an academic advisor in the Wayne State Pre-Med and Health Science Center. I'm going to talk a little bit about personal statements. First thing, you have 5,300 words to describe why you want to be a doctor. Really, the ultimate goal here is to establish your why you want to go into medicine. This is an opportunity to talk about yourself, to talk about your experiences. My personal preference on these, I want to really hear about what you've done and how it continues to drive you into medicine. I'm really not terribly interested in what other people did or what you watched or what something that someone else did. I really do want to hear about you and how you've grown and developed your why into medicine. So in your personal statement, you want to include examples to show your reasoning and preparedness in place to address application deficiencies if applicable. There's the AAMC guidelines for writing, kind of we like to students generally follow. I'm just going to read them off, but we want you to use SWE, which is standard written English. Use positive, engaging language that helps demonstrate the writer's achievements. So be positive, talk about the positives. This is an opportunity for you to continue to tell why this is your goal, why medicine, why you're putting all this work and outside the classroom experience in. So it is a wonderful opportunity to talk about yourself. Word choices and terminology are well integrated to communicate knowledge of the field. So in your experiences, you've gained some knowledge. Maybe you're a scribe. You can use different languages that you've learned. We want you to tell a unique story. Connected story throughout the essay using concrete examples and insightful reflections. The essay is interesting and relevant, inspiring readers want to meet the author. I think that's great advice. We do writing workshops, and I think we're pretty honest, Laura, right? With, is this in the right direction? Is this grabbing me? Is this really showing me who you are and what you've accomplished while you're in your undergrad? And again, these are all examples of what we would consider a professional essay. Again, clearly identifies your why early to frame the statement. Key components for connecting personal story to why clearly presented with detailed supporting evidence. Writing includes a logical flow of ideas supporting by compelling examples. Again, your experiences that you've gone through outside the classroom should give you some compelling examples of what you've accomplished. Use this as an opportunity to professionally and positively talk about it. Okay, your paragraphs are focused and strong topic sentences and smooth and almost seamless transition. So a lot of these are these are standard writing things that a writing center at your university could potentially help you out. Make sure things are flowing, your sentences are flowing correctly. Your writing, finally, this is the last one. Your writing showcases detailed examples that are specific and descriptive with outcomes, growth, experiential learning obstacles, overcome shares when applicable. The biggest thing to take out of that is I want to hear an outcome, a final portion of that. That students write something and then it just ended. Well, what happened? Tell me what happened. In medicine, you're going to have to find out what happened and what was the final outcome. So make sure it is one of your examples has that complete experience with an outcome. Does any of my colleagues, Laura, Amanda, have anything to share on that? Just want to get your feedback.
And I'm also would like to hear Dr. Varner and Emma Harris. They are able to see personal statements. So coming from an interviewer standpoint, Dr. Varner.
Yeah, thank you. I read those personal statements very closely, and I can see the ones that are mimicked from other standard statements. My advice is be yourself, tell your story. Don't try and make your story into a standardized personal statement. I remember one year, all the stories, all the personal statements started with some kind of wow first sentence. And it was driving me crazy. I don't know who was advising students to make this like, bam, I heard someone fall from the floor onto the floor, and I went to go see, and it was my grandmother. She had passed out, and then they went on from there. And I kept seeing that over and over again. And it saddened me because it was, you're trying to fit your story into somebody else's template. What we want to see is, who are you? You know, explain why you want to do this. And even if you don't have a lot of medical reasons in your past, because sometimes students feel that they have to add in, well, somebody had a medical problem, or I had a medical problem, and this is their why. But, you know, there may not be that in your story, you know, but there is usually a aha moment in all of our stories where we decide on what we want to do with our lives. So connecting that aha moment to your overall goals and plans. I think also too, sometimes students get too wrapped up in what they want to do with their lives and tell me, forecast what specialty they want to go into and why, when a lot of times that once you get to med school, yeah, that is specialty. You might find out, yeah, I'm not even going to do that. So speak to you, the characteristics in you, the reason why you really are passionate about that. And yes, the examples are vital to that. So that would be my take on personal statement.
Emma.
Hello, yes. So like Dawn had introduced me, I'm a current M2. So it really is not that long ago that I was in all of your positions. So I'm coming into this from the perspective of not only an interviewer, but having done this myself very recently. So for me, I think the biggest thing is that you'll come out of this session with a lot of tips and tricks from everyone on this panel. And especially about something like a personal statement that is very personalized to who you are. So getting all these perspectives is wonderful, but they can sometimes kind of contradict each other. So just taking all of this advice and kind of figuring out what speaks to you is really important, I think, when you're in a session like this. But for me personally, I know by the time I see applications coming through, they have been looked at by a lot of people. And I know that these are very high quality candidates that I'm looking at. So for the personal statement, I'm really looking at the personality. And there's a way to do and show your personality with your personal statement that's very professional and, you know, kind of follows a storyline. But I think that being able to show who you are and what you're really passionate about, and a lot of times that will be medicine and kind of the journey that you've kind of taken to get yourself to here. But I think some of the best personal statements can tie in a lot of other passions that you've had, that you've been able to translate to what you want to accomplish in medicine or how you want to accomplish that in medicine. So I think just kind of looking at yourself as a whole person, this is one of the few places on your application you really get to show yourself outside of your experiences or your metrics. And so really capitalizing on that and tying it all together and using this as like the bow on top of your application to show yourself as a person and not just an applicant.
Thank you.
Can I address something in the chat?
Absolutely.
So there are two questions that are sort of on this topic. The first one about, I want to help others. When we work with students, and we try to do this from the beginning, because I think it's important to be reflective on this particular aspect. I like to flip that concept. So if you're working on this piece of your journey right now, writing that personal statement, think about, yes, we acknowledge you want to help somebody. Why is being a doctor specifically the way you need to be a helper? Right? What is it particularly about the job that connects with helping, and either what your skills are, what your goals are, maybe not a specialty, but like big picture, what your goals are. Because there's always that come back to the helping, which is that we're all helpers, right? Everybody on this call right now is a helper in some capacity. When I'm working with students who kind of get stuck on that because I want to help people, I try to get them to identify what are the things that you believe you will be doing as a doctor, or the skills that you have in this particular field that make this the place you need to be. Okay, so just try that angle. And then in terms of writing about that formative medical event that is propelling the why in medicine. Again, I think we all work with a lot of students who have those events. And they can be difficult to write out because they are really, really important to you, and they are part of your journey. And so to deny that would be to deny your whole self being present in the application. So I don't want you to get the sense that we're asking you not to do that. But I would advise two things. One, remember, this is not a Hollywood script. Dr. Varner's comment about the grandmother falling down and that style of writing that's very overwrought is what can be frustrating as a reader reading multiple of these. Keep your language simple and straightforward. That helps you connect more directly. And remember that as you write, and you might need to process in writing how this event shaped you, and your witnessing of another person going through pain and going through trouble. But ultimately, I need to come back to what your response was to that situation. And ultimately, this needs to be more about how you took action and less about what happened to the other person. So I think again, always coming back to that, I think, is a really important thing to do as you continue to revise. That's all I got.
Next slide.
Okay, this is also me. Part of your application is going to be the opportunity to enter up to 15 experiences. We always talk about quality over quantity. You get 700 characters for each of them. We want you to be strategic on your characters. Highlight the AAMC core competencies. How have you engaged with those core competencies in your professional, your work and activities? Okay. You have 3 most meaningful, where you can add an additional 1325 to it. Again, we always have conversations with students on their experiences, and a lot of times it's is this one? What does this count? Was this count as it? It's shadowing, clinical experiences, the options that you know of, phlebotomy and MAs and scribe, and you can add your non-clinical experiences there. If there's something that you're into here, we want to hear about it. We want, again, this is another opportunity to talk about who you are. And we know that if you've done well in your sciences, we know you're good in the classroom by looking at your grades. But is this an opportunity to show areas where you are uncomfortable and you've engaged in those areas? So we want to hear about those areas too. But most of the time we talk to students about their experiences, and you can enter up to 15, depending on the student. Really want to be closer to that 10 to 15 experiences. And if it's not, sometimes it's, you have to have the question of, is this your time to apply to med school? Does anybody that's want to chime in on this that's done it? Don?
Can I chime in on that one?
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
I do think, again, this is an opportunity, and sometimes students just put in duties that they performed, very generic responses. This is another opportunity to connect the dots as to why you want to be a doc. As the personal statement, it's more of a free-flowing opportunity to share who you are. This secondary, because this is part of the secondary application, correct? And
This is part of the AMCAS application. so
AMCAS
they would- Right,
application,
not the secondary.
right. But in this section, you can connect the dots for us. Why did you choose this activity? Don't just tell me what you did, because it doesn't help me to understand you as an applicant. I mean, you are being interviewed for a very short period of time, and the more we get to know who you are, the better your chances are of getting that seat. And it's even with a not as high of an MCAT score or not as high as a GPA, some of the times when we read these questions and you explain, I chose to do this activity, and these are the things I learned from it. I got out, these are the skill sets, and why those skill sets you believe are useful. It helps us to get a better picture of who you are. So I really recommend that you word this well to connect the dots. So even if you said, you know, I was a camp volunteer, whatever it was, and it's not medical, and it's not, you know, one of your, you know, 3. Tell me why you continue to be a camp volunteer. What were the things that you gained from this that you can use in your career path? You know, because that helps us as well. I think too, if any of these you've done for a while and you show leadership or growth, make sure you add that into the description. I think that's all I have to say on these.
Thank you.
Is this me too?
Yeah.
Okay. AMCAS list of types of experiences. I'll just read them off again. Some students don't realize that they can add this stuff. Artistic endeavors, community service, volunteering, medical, clinical, community service and volunteering, not medical and clinical. That would be non-clinical. Conferences attended, extracurricular activities, hobbies, honors, awards, and recognitions. Intercollegiate athletics is great. Leadership, not listed elsewhere. Military service, paid employment, medical, clinical, non-paid, or paid employment that's non-medical and clinical. We say that because it's an opportunity to talk about if you've worked at a store, if you've worked in customer service, the opportunity to talk about that you have dealt with people, and you've dealt with people in maybe some tough situations. So that stuff does count. That's admirable. Presentations and poster presentations, publications, research labs, social justice advocacy, teaching, tutoring, teaching assistant, other. A lot of opportunities there. Every student will look a little bit different, but again, the ones you do, as Dr. Farmer said, the ones you do, talk about why you did it and why you chose that. That's great advice, not just about what you did. Why did you continue to do this as you went through your journey to applying to medical school?
And I think it's important to understand, back one slide, it's important to understand that we want to know basically all the things that you've done outside of academic work. Many times we see applications and I'm like, well, you only listed like 3 experiences. Well, I didn't think you wanted to know that I worked at Taco Bell. We need to know you work at Taco Bell.
Yeah.
We need to know that you have fewer hours to do some of these experiences than someone else who didn't have to work. I think it's very important that we get a sense of your application and your entire, you know, work life academic balance in these experiences. So yes, we do want to know when you did something other than, you know, medical clinical experiences. Emma, did you have any thoughts?
Yes, I was just gonna ask to add something. So I think to kind of reiterate what Doug was saying, I think the quality over quantity is really, really important in this section. Don't feel like you have to put 15 things that you did if you didn't feel that, or if you don't feel that all 15 were really, really formative in who you are as an applicant right now. And yes, I think exactly what everybody was saying, what you did and what you learned, but I also think a big thing is how you want to use that in your future career and education, which won't always have an answer to for every single experience. But I think if you're able to take away from an experience, not only what you learned, but also how you can apply it to your future in medicine, that's really, really a great thing. But yeah, and for the things that are not necessarily medical, if you were an athlete or a musician or you just love to cook, kind of being able to tie skills that you are able to sharpen in those activities and how you're going to be able to apply it in medicine. Like if you're an athlete, you have to have very, very good time management skills, and how are you going to be able to apply that to your studies? Things like that. I think if you're able to tie everything back to medicine, that is a good experience for sure.
Next slide.
That's me. Hi, everyone. I'm Anna Horowitz, pre-med academic advisor at Wayne State. So I'm going to talk a little bit about letters of recommendation. And I think one of the most important pieces of advice that we sometimes have to repeat a couple of times is that the person that's writing your letter should be someone that you have spent the time developing a really quality relationship with, meaning that they know you very well and you've taken the time to get to know them very well, right? So we always talk about this idea of quality of relationship over title of writer. I get a lot of students that come into my office who say, I met the dean of the School of Medicine and he shook my hand and said, hey, nice to meet you. Should I ask him for a letter of recommendation because he's the dean of the School of Medicine? And if he doesn't know you, that letter isn't going to be as impactful with the people who are reviewing your application and ultimately reviewing it for interviews, right? So most important is obviously checking the requirements for the schools that you're applying to, but then making sure that those people are ones that you've put in the work to develop a relationship with. Couple of tips that are going to be or that will allow you to engage in that professionalism that we're always coaching our students to practice is asking your letter writers in person, making sure that you're giving them enough time to commit and write it. And before you know, or before you go and ask, knowing what your storage method is going to be. For example, our undergrads at Wayne State University, we do not have a committee letter. So our students have to think about how they plan on collecting those letters, whether it be through the AMCAS letter service, or if they're going to use a third-party service like Interfolio. If you're attending a school that uses a committee letter, you may want to touch base with that committee to see how that process works. And when you do go and ask, be very confident. Don't be afraid to say, I know that we've worked in this capacity. If you're willing to write, I'd really love if you could comment on my teamwork, my capacity for improvement as, I tried this experiment and it didn't work, and what I did to kind of grow from that experience. Next slide, unless you have somebody wants to jump in. Okay, so Wayne State University, like I said, each school is going to have their own set of letter writer requirements. And I always talk to my students early on in this process about taking a look at their, the schools that they're really interested in and comparing their letter writer requirements across the board so that students aren't A, surprised that they're missing a letter that's required, and B, can ask people to make the most of the requirements. So Wayne State does require a minimum of 3 letters, and those need to be uploaded into your AMCAS application by the time you've submitted your secondary application to the Wayne State School of Medicine. 2, we'll strongly recommend it, but we talk to our students about 2 of those letters coming from faculty members. One of those faculty members may be a PI that you worked with in a research lab. The other one should really come from a faculty member that you have interacted with in class, right? And have, again, worked to develop that relationship with by using office hours and asking questions, being actively engaged. Wayne State wants your letters to be recent, right? They want a recent testimony of who you are and what your qualities are and why you're going to be an excellent student and ultimately physician. So any letter older than 3 years is not considered by our admissions committee. Again, engaging in that professionalism, making sure that your letter writers are including a signature, their own signature, and then also writing a letter on their letterhead. Even if they're a retired physician that you have been shadowing for, a year or two, they can create letterhead for themselves as a retired physician. Again, it makes that letter look more professional. If you are an MD or a PhD applicant, it makes sense that you need to get one of those letters from a researcher. And then if you're a student who is engaging in any kind of academic enhancing coursework, post-bachelor's degree, whether it be just some classes or, as part of a master's degree or certificate program, again, sticking with that theme of those letters being as recent as possible, one of your letters should come from a faculty member that you've encountered and engaged with in that post-bac setting. I don't know if anybody wants to add.
My student interviewers
do.
do not see letters of recommendation.
I do. I'd love to share. I read, and this is Dr. Varner, I read those letters very carefully because to me, they are character recommendations or character references. When, as was stated, getting someone that knows you is extremely important. And I know sometimes that's challenging, because, do you just make up hours to go and talk to them just to get them to know you or what in your busy day? But it's really important that when I read a letter, that someone is not just regurgitating your transcript, or that they had you in a class for one term and they saw you and you're at the top of the class. While that's nice, I can see that you got an A in a class. And so I can see that you're academically sound. What I look for are character references in that. I also know that in these letters, there are ways in which people with wording rank students, whether they be exceptional, highly recommended, best I've ever had versus, these are good students. And again, that goes to show me that they may or may not know you well. As it relates to the committee letters or recommendations, really find out who is writing that letter, who is inputting information about you in those committees, because what I have seen too in those committee recommendation letters, some of them can be very generic. And you want to know who you need to talk to and make sure that they too know you very well. But these are character references. And again, we have a very short period of time to get to know you. So having someone who spent some time with you attest to your honor, attest to your work ethic, attest to your problem solving and analytical skills and leadership skills, is something we like to see.
Next slide, please.
Oh, I guess I got to unmute myself. Okay. So you've spent all this time, you're happy with your test scores and your MCAT. You have done an awesome job communicating your why in your personal statement. You've got some well-crafted work and activity write-ups that will help connect the dots throughout all aspects of your application. You've got those amazing people who are willing to write on your behalf and talk about how terrific you are. Here's just some tips before you hit submit. Okay. Proofread. I cannot state this enough. What my suggestion is, before you hit submit, print out the PDF of your app. Okay. Get a red pen and or get your friend, start reading through that thing backwards. Right? This is an old school, like my middle school English teacher would make us read our papers backward to proofread. it forces you to slow down. You will find all the weird missing punctuation or the double spaces that you didn't need. You will find if you got somebody's email address in there wrong and you did what I do, which is you type somebody's email as instead of Gmail, it's GMIAL, right? So you're going to find all those funny little things. You're going to find if you put something in and maybe you're missing a couple words that you didn't realize you were missing. This is so important. I also think getting somebody else who maybe is not as familiar with the content to look at it again can be a good way to go. I think, you know, we get a little blind to what we've written, and you have a tendency to develop this habit of skipping over because you think you know what it says, but you need to actually look at it and see what it says. So be sure to do that. This is your chance to make a good impression. So it's really important to pay attention to these little details. You don't want to give schools a reason to kind of move you by. If there's a lot of errors, it's hard to take it seriously. Again, as somebody who's reviewed these with students. Read carefully and follow the directions. I love this. I do think AMCAS has like the most amazing set of directions. I would never tell you to read the entire 2025 student guide because it's too long, but I will tell you that anything you've got questions about are in there. So that's where your Control F, figuring things out as you search that PDF is really, really useful. So I think where especially referencing the directions is important is when you're looking at things like course entry. Course entry can seem really overwhelming, and making sure you're getting that entered correctly will relieve a lot of stress and will help the processing. And the directions that the AAMC provides are excellent for that. And I think that the other place that is really important is, again, going back to your school list and looking at what are their specific requirements. I had a student ask me yesterday, say, would they really just reject me if I was missing this thing? Yes. Yes. Yes, they will. So if you can't check all the boxes, if your application does not fit into the parameters defined by the program, save your time and money and don't apply to them. I'm gonna pass this along to Amanda for the next couple bullets.
Yeah, so use a professional email address. May seem, pretty standard forward. I think what some students might think of as a professional email address may differ from others. So sticking with something, that is identifying like your first and last name, with maybe a number if you need to, at a carrier is helpful, or using your school address if that's still available to you. The other important thing that you really want to make sure about is that the settings in your email account are accepting emails from all senders, and they're not getting bounce back errors, because that makes communication with potential students very hard, and you don't want to miss something as a student that has a deadline in it. So check your settings after you go through this application process so that you're not missing anything.
And check your spam.
Yeah, check your spam if that's set up. Yeah.
We find all the time students who got an invitation for a secondary and it's 2.5, 3, 4 weeks later, and they just missed it because they never checked their spam.
Yeah.
So use formatting free word processing. This is kind of a funny one, but so if you copy and paste directly from like Google or Word into the AMCAS application, you won't see it on the front end, but doing that can add like wingdings when it goes through verification. So one of the big tips, you can do one of two things. One, if you're a fast and accurate typer, you can certainly retype all of your carefully crafted entries. But if you're not like me, you can do one of a couple of things. First of all, you could take your Google Doc, you can copy and paste it into something that is text-free, save that, and then copy and paste that into there, so that like I use Notepad for for a variety of submissions that we need to do on our portals here on our campus, and that can be a great way to make sure there's no formatting that's going to cause goofy things, because sometimes too you'll copy and space and the spacing will be off things like that when you copy and paste. The other thing you can do is you can check and see, I know that there are keyboard shortcuts. So those of you who love a keyboard shortcut, look for the format free copy and paste keyboard shortcut for your system, because that can also work. Again, you're just doing this to make sure that when the medical school admissions team receives your product, that it is easy to read and make sense, and they don't have to parse through the wingdings. And then, oh yeah, I'm doing this last one too. Respond promptly to all requests. So where this gets challenging, I think, is when you have to do secondaries. So sometimes prioritizing your secondaries, and I don't know, maybe Emma might have a takeaway kind of on this piece, but responding promptly may change over time as your school list and the things you have to do is based on what you've received from schools. I don't know if that makes sense, but some schools will send their secondaries out faster than others. So looking at that, who are the schools that you're most interested in? Let's prioritize them first, but continuing to check, do I need additional information to send to other schools? Did I get a secondary from a school that is also high on my priority list, and I need to kind of make sure I'm taking care of them early on so that I stay at the top of their lists? Really the time management that comes into managing secondaries and managing any other additional requests that a med school might have of you as a candidate.
I'm going to hit this, and it's where to go for assistance. We do not have advisors in our office. Fortunately, Wayne State University has some of the best pre-med advisors in the country. Unfortunately, they are responsible for Wayne State University students only. Hopefully your school has an equally phenomenal set of pre-med advisors. Seek them out. Sometimes you think you don't have them, but you do. You can go to NAAHP, find an advisor. It is the National Association of Advisors to the Health Professions. And they will help you find the advisor that is assigned to your school. But if you absolutely do not have one, sometimes you can get resources from them. So I would say reach out to them. Please go to the AAMC website. They can answer a lot of the questions on there. There's a lot of information. Just be patient, take your time. We've listed some of the websites here. But that's kind of basically our do's and don'ts. I will look for any last minute thoughts from Dr. Varner and Emma, and then we will continue to answer some questions as we go along.
Sure. As it relates to just in general, if you are lucky enough to get an interview, and I say that because, you know, all of these things we just went through, there's a weeding process, right? One of the things, and in general, be true to yourself, I think is the biggest thing. Be confident in what you're submitting. Be confident in your abilities. One of the things that I see when I interview students is I see that they may not be confident, and it shows. If you've gotten this far for an interview, there's something we like about you. But we see a lot of students. So being able to distinguish you from someone else really shows in your level of confidence, and being able to share with somebody else, to paint a picture of who you are to us, helps us make that decision. And that may sound like very simple advice, but it's real. You being able to confidently share what you've done, how it has impacted you, why you did it, verbally and in writing, really is what more so, I think, makes the decision on that seat. Because most students that come to us, they have high GPAs. They have high MCAT scores, right? So what distinguishes you from somebody else is just that. The other piece I'd like to say is make sure you understand the school you're applying and making sure it fits you. And when you get to the interview process, making sure that you're able to speak to that and relate your experiences and how it fits with our institution. You would be surprised at how many students I have interviewed that really could not articulate our mission. And I find that to be a little bit sad because it's on the website and it does not show well. And while reading your application, I could see some of the, things that might relate, but they were not able, the student was not able to articulate them. So I think, understanding the mission of the school, all med schools aren't created equally either. Each med school has some differences that that institution, when we're evaluating your application, do you fit well with us? But also understand too that this is a process where you are too looking to see if you fit well. So you're not just being interviewed, you're also making sure that the school is a good fit for you. And that goes back to being true to yourself, making sure this is the best fit. I'll leave it at there.
Emma?
Yeah, I think my little bit of advice when it comes to the interviews is, again, by the time I'm interviewing somebody, I know that they've gone through a grueling process of selection and they are a very, very highly qualified candidate. And so the biggest thing that I look for is this someone that I can see myself working in a team or a fellow classmate, somebody that will uphold everything that Wayne State stands for, and someone that is, easy to talk to, seems like they are able to work in a team. Those are qualities that I think sometimes can be really hard to show in the writing part of the application. So being able to speak with confidence, that is a very big thing, I think. And practicing an interview, it's clear when someone is practiced. It's really hard to talk about yourself in a succinct way, in a professional way. So, when you're given the opportunity for an interview, practicing talking to yourself on a empty Zoom call or, just in front of your laptop, those types of things, that preparation is very, very obvious. And it definitely makes a difference when it comes to being on the other side of that call.
All right. There's probably a few questions left in here. I definitely want to try to keep on time. One thing that I will let you know is certainly kind of keep an eye on things that, you hear from us. We do have our events page where we do have activities coming up. We do have some tours coming up. Also, all of our previous webinars can be found on YouTube. Many of them will be on our homepage, admissions.med.wayne.edu. And I'm going to try to come up with one question had to do with the median scores. If you look at the MSAR, you will see the range of scores for each school. So for us, we might have a median score of students that are accepted, but the range of scores of people who have matriculated is going to be much broader. So, making sure that you're a good fit for our school, maybe you can be on the lower end of that MCAT, but you have those experiences and those qualities that Wayne State is looking for. So I think it's very important really to kind of review the MSAR. I think it's an excellent publication for, I want to say it's $25 now. And you get a lot of information. It's $30, $35. Okay. It's $35. It's an online publication. It has everything. Other questions. We were trying to answer them as we went along. looking really quick. If anyone, oh, there's 3 new messages. Let me make sure they're not all just that. Again, if I missed a question, if you want more information, MD admissions with an S at wayne.edu. I have a fantastic team that is really good at answering questions. If they can't answer questions, they'll bounce it to Kristen or myself or Tasha. So please feel free to send us messages, and we are going to let you go. And I want to thank all of you for joining us. Hopefully we'll see an application from you sometime soon. And I wish you all the very best. Thank you.